I spent 6 years building a system that made my company millions. But when I asked for a promotion, my boss looked me in the eye and said, "You're not ready." So the next day, I stopped doing everything that made me indispensable. Within 48 hours, clients panicked, deals collapsed, and suddenly the same people who ignored me were begging for my help. That's when they finally learned the truth. I wasn't just an employee, I was the system. The sky over Chicago was the color of cold steel the morning I walked into Laura Mitchell's office, carrying 6 years of work condensed into a single portfolio. My hands weren't shaking, but they weren't steady either. I told myself this was it. The moment everything I'd sacrificed for would finally make sense. Laura didn't look up right away. She flipped through the pages with the kind of detached efficiency that made it clear she had already made up her mind long before I walked in. "Daniel," she said finally, adjusting her glasses, "I appreciate the effort you put into this." Effort. 6 years of late nights, weekends lost, missed birthdays. That was effort. I kept my expression neutral. "Thank you." She set the portfolio down like it weighed nothing. "But after reviewing your performance and overall readiness, I don't believe you're prepared for a senior role yet." The words didn't hit all at once. They sank in slowly, like water seeping into cracks. "I see," I replied, my voice calm in a way that almost surprised me. "You're reliable," she continued, "consistent. But leadership requires visibility, influence, presence. Perhaps in another year." Another year. I thought about the systems I rebuilt when I first joined, broken workflows, missing data, clients on the verge of leaving. I thought about the nights I stayed until security asked me to leave, the deals I salvaged, the chaos I quietly prevented. And somehow, I was still invisible. "I understand," I said, and I did, just not in the way she expected. As I stood to leave, she was already checking her email, the conversation effectively over. My future, decided in less than 10 minutes. Back at my desk, the office buzzed like nothing had changed. People laughed, keyboards clicked. Someone argued about coffee orders near the break room. My phone buzzed. Ryan. "Hey man, I found a location, small corner spot near downtown. We could actually do this. Coffee shop, you and me. Call me." I stared at the message longer than I should have. A different life. A slower one. Something real. My fingers hovered over the screen before I typed back, "Can't right now. Work's crazy. Talk later." I hit send and immediately felt something twist in my chest. "Hey, Daniel?" I looked up. Sophie stood by my desk holding a tablet, her expression a mix of hesitation and curiosity. She was new, maybe 3 weeks in, but she had already learned what most people here hadn't. If something was broken, I was the one who fixed it. "I've been going through the client integration dashboard," she said. "I don't fully understand how the escalation logic works. Did you build this?" "Yeah," I replied. Her eyes lit up slightly. "It's kind of brilliant." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because no one had ever said that out loud before. "Thanks," I said simply. She hesitated. "Would you mind walking me through it sometime?" I glanced at my screen. Emails piling up, tasks waiting, the same endless cycle. "Sure," I said, "when I get a chance." She nodded, but I could tell she already understood what that meant. Later never came easily here. As she walked away, I leaned back in my chair and looked around the office again. For the first time in 6 years, something felt off. Not anger, not even disappointment. Clarity. If this was how they saw me, reliable, invisible, replaceable, then maybe the problem wasn't what I lacked. Maybe it was what I had been giving away for free. And for the first time, I started to wonder what would happen if I stopped. The next morning, I arrived at 7:30 a.m. out of habit. The office was still half asleep, dim lights, empty desks, the low hum of servers in the background. This was my time, the quiet hours where everything actually got done. I dropped my bag under the desk and powered on my computer. Before the screen even fully lit up, I already knew what I'd find. Alerts, flagged tickets, unresolved issues from the night before. It had always been this way. What hadn't always been this way was me. As I scanned through the system dashboard, my mind drifted back to my first year here. The mess I walked into hadn't just been bad, it had been catastrophic. No documentation, no structured workflows. Entire client histories stored in scattered spreadsheets with inconsistent formats. I remembered sitting alone in this exact office long after midnight trying to piece together how anything even worked. Back then, no one had helped me. So I became the help. I rebuilt everything from the ground up. Automated escalation systems, centralized dashboards, step-by-step process guides. I didn't just fix problems, I made sure they wouldn't happen again. And somehow, that became invisible. Daniel? Sophie's voice pulled me back. She stood beside my desk, tablet in hand, her brows slightly furrowed. Up close, I noticed details I hadn't before. Light brown hair tied in a loose ponytail, minimal makeup, a practical style. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, but there was a sharpness in her eyes, observant, curious. "I'm stuck on something," she said. "The supplier sync module. It's throwing errors when I try to update client timelines." I pulled the dashboard onto my screen. It took me less than 10 seconds to see the issue. "They didn't give you access to the secondary validation layer, did they?" I asked. She blinked. "The what?" I leaned back slightly. "Of course they didn't. That's because the system isn't designed the way it looks," I explained. "There's a hidden dependency tied to legacy data mapping. If you don't adjust that first, everything breaks." She stared at me like I'd just switched languages. "None of that is in the training materials," she said quietly. "I know," I replied, because I had written most of those materials, and even then, they had only approved half of it. "Can you show me?" she asked. I hesitated, not because I couldn't, but because I suddenly realized something uncomfortable. She wasn't underperforming. She was underprepared. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'll walk you through it." As I explained the system step by step, I watched her expression shift, from confusion to understanding. She learned fast, faster than most. "That's insane," she said at one point. "Why isn't this standardized across the team?" I didn't answer right away, because the real answer wasn't technical. It was political. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. This time it wasn't a text, it was a call. I stepped away from my desk and answered. "Hey," I said. "Hey?" His voice was tight. "That's it?" Ryan Brooks, my younger brother by 3 years, 27, taller than me, broader shoulders, always wearing that worn leather jacket like he refused to grow out of his early 20s. He had this restless energy about him, like he was always chasing something bigger than himself. "You saw my message, right?" he continued. "I did. I've just been busy." "You're always busy, Dan." There was no anger in his voice. That would have been easier, just disappointment. "I found a place," he said. "I actually found something real this time, and you didn't even call." I closed my eyes briefly. "I said I'd talk later." "You've been saying that for 5 years." Whew, that one landed. "I can't just drop everything," I said. "I have responsibilities." "And what about this?" he shot back. "What about us?" Silence stretched between us. "I gotta go," I said finally. "We'll talk soon." "Yeah," he muttered. "Sure we will." The line went dead. When I walked back to my desk, Sophie looked up at me, like she could read something had shifted. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. But for the second day in a row, that wasn't entirely true. The decision didn't feel dramatic. There was no speech, no turning point music playing in the background. Just a quiet line I drew for myself the moment I sat down at my desk. 9 a.m. exactly. Not 7:30, not early, not eager, just on time. I logged in, opened my task list, and for the first time in 6 years, I ignored everything that wasn't explicitly assigned to me. No scanning for hidden issues, no preemptive fixes, no saving people before they even knew something was wrong. Just my job, nothing more. By 10:15, the first crack appeared. "Daniel, quick question?" It was Mark Reynolds from procurement. Early 30s, slightly overweight, always loosening his tie by noon like the job physically suffocated him. He was friendly, but lazy in the way that comes from knowing someone else will clean up after you. "There's a delay in the supplier chain, systems not updating. Can you take a look?" I didn't even turn fully from my screen. That falls under procurement system management, I said. You should escalate it through your team lead. He blinked. Yeah, but you usually just... I'm focusing on my assigned responsibilities, I replied calmly. The silence that followed was new. He nodded slowly, unsure, then walked away. At 11:40, Sophie showed up again. But this time she didn't look curious. She looked stressed. I tried what you showed me yesterday, she said quickly. But there's another error now, and no one else knows how to fix it. I glanced at her screen. I knew exactly what it was. I could fix it in under a minute. Instead, I leaned back slightly. Did you check the documentation? I asked. Her expression faltered. I tried, but it's not clear. It's in there, I said, under extended validation protocols. She hesitated. Could you just... I believe you can figure it out, I said, softer this time. That wasn't entirely true. Not because she wasn't capable, but because the system was never designed to be understood without me. She nodded slowly, but I could see it, the doubt creeping in. Not in herself, in the environment. By 3 p.m. the office felt different. More noise, more movement, more questions floating without answers. And for once, none of them landed on me. At exactly 5 p.m. I shut down my computer. No hesitation, no, just one more thing. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out while conversation still buzzed behind me. It felt wrong. And at the same time, unbelievably right. The evening air was cool as I stepped outside. Chicago was alive in that early night glow, cars rushing past, people heading somewhere that mattered to them. For the first time in years, I wasn't staying behind. I pulled out my phone. Ryan. I stared at his name for a few seconds before hitting call. He picked up on the third ring. Dan? Yeah, I said. Hey. A pause. You okay? He asked, cautious this time. Yeah, I replied. I just wanted to talk. Another pause, then softer. Okay. I leaned against my car, exhaling slowly. Tell me about the cafe, I said. There was a shift in his tone immediately. Energy. Life. Wait, seriously? Yeah, I'm listening. As he started talking, about the location, the foot traffic, the idea of building something from scratch, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Interest. Not obligation, not pressure, just possibility. And somewhere between his words and the city lights around me, I understood something clearly. For years I had been holding everything together for everyone else. Maybe it was time to see what happened, when I finally let go. By the next morning, the shift had consequences. I walked into the office at 9 a.m. sharp, same as yesterday. But the atmosphere was completely different. Tension. You could feel it before you even heard it. People weren't chatting. They were moving fast, voices lower but sharper, like something fragile was about to break. Or already had. Daniel! I turned. It was Kevin Adler, mid-40s, tall, slightly hunched posture, always dressed in expensive suits that didn't quite hide the constant stress in his face. He was one of the senior operations managers, known for being decisive, as long as someone else had already solved the problem. What's going on with the Ellison account? He asked, walking straight toward me. Ellison, our biggest client. The system's showing inconsistencies in their deployment schedule. We've got conflicting data across 3 modules. I nodded slightly. I already knew what it was. A cascading failure from a missed validation step, something I used to catch automatically. That should be handled by the operations team, I said calmly. Kevin frowned. It is, but they don't know what they're looking at. I met his eyes. That's not my assigned scope. For a moment he just stared at me. Then, without another word, he turned and walked off, faster this time. By 10:30, the cracks had turned into fractures. Clusters of people gathered around screens, voices rising, names being thrown around, and then, Daniel, Sophie. But this time, she looked different. Her usual composure was gone. Her eyes were slightly red, like she hadn't slept, or had been holding something back. They're blaming me, she said. I stood up slowly. For what? The supplier sync failure yesterday, she replied. They said I mishandled the escalation process. "That's not true," I said immediately. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't know how to prove it." That hit harder than I expected, because I knew exactly why. The system wasn't transparent. It wasn't designed to be. It was designed to work, as long as I was there. "I followed everything I could find," she continued, "but half the documentation doesn't match what's actually happening." I exhaled slowly. "They didn't train you properly," I said. She let out a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah, I figured that out." There was a pause. "I don't think I can do this," she admitted. "If this is how it works here, I don't think I belong." For a second I saw myself. 6 years ago. Same confusion, same isolation. The difference was, I had chosen to stay. "Don't make a decision based on someone else's failure," I said quietly. She looked at me, searching for something. "Then what should I do?" I hesitated, because the answer I used to give wasn't the one I could give anymore. "Document everything," I said finally. "Protect your work." It wasn't a solution, but it was survival. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Ryan. This time it was a file. Business Plan Draft V3.pdf. I opened it. Clean layout, detailed projections, branding ideas, even a rough interior design, warm lighting, wooden counters, a place that felt human. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. While everything here was falling apart, he was building something. "Daniel, we need you in the conference room. Now." It was Kevin again, voice tight. I locked my phone and stood up. As I walked past Sophie's desk, she gave me a small look, half hope, half uncertainty. And for the first time since I made my decision, I felt the weight of it. Not because things were breaking, but because now, everyone could finally see what had been holding it all together. The conference room felt smaller than usual, too many people, too much pressure. Kevin stood at the head of the table, pacing slightly, while Laura Mitchell sat rigidly beside him, her usual composed demeanor cracking just enough to reveal strain. A large screen displayed the Ellison dashboard, red warnings scattered across it like bleeding wounds. And at the far end of the table sat a man I hadn't seen in person before. Richard Cole, late 50s, silver hair perfectly combed, sharp jawline, and the kind of calm presence that didn't need to raise its voice to command attention. Regional director, the kind of man who only showed up when things were already going wrong. "Daniel," he said as I walked in, his voice measured. "Please, sit." I did. Kevin spoke first. "We have a critical failure in the Ellison rollout, conflicting system outputs, delayed updates, and the client is threatening to pull the contract." Richard leaned forward slightly. "We've been told you understand this system better than anyone." I folded my hands calmly. "I designed most of it." Silence. Laura shifted in her seat. "Then we need you to fix it," Kevin said quickly. I didn't respond immediately. Not this time. "I can," I said finally. "But I need to clarify something first." All eyes were on me now. This situation isn't a sudden failure. It's a result of systemic gaps, documentation limitations, incomplete training, and over-reliance on undocumented processes. Kevin frowned. "We don't have time for analysis." "We don't have time because we never did the analysis," I cut in, my voice still calm. That surprised even me. Before Kevin could respond, another voice spoke up. "She's right." Everyone turned. Sophie. She stood near the side of the room, clearly out of place among senior staff. But she didn't back down. "She's been holding this system together," she continued, her voice steady despite the tension. "The rest of us were never properly trained. We've been guessing half the time." Laura's eyes narrowed slightly. "This isn't the time." "It is," Sophie said, "because blaming people like me doesn't fix anything." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Richard nodded once, slowly. "Noted," he said. I glanced at Sophie. Trust. That's what that was. And it mattered more than I expected. Richard turned back to me. "Daniel, what do you need?" This was the moment. The shift. "I've been approached by another company," I said. The words landed heavier than anything else in the room. Kevin blinked. "You're leaving?" I haven't decided yet, I replied. But they're offering a senior role, with authority over systems like this. Laura's jaw tightened. Richard didn't react immediately. He just studied me. And what are you saying? He asked. I'm saying, I continued, that I can resolve this situation. But the real issue isn't technical, it's structural. And I won't keep fixing symptoms without addressing the cause. Silence again, this time heavier. After the meeting, I stepped out into the hallway, the tension still clinging to me. My phone buzzed. Ryan, I answered. So? He asked immediately. It's a mess, I said. Of course it is, he replied. Because you're the only one holding it together. I leaned against the wall. They want me to fix it. And you will, he said, because that's who you are. I didn't deny it. But listen, he added, his tone shifting. Don't make your whole life about that place, Dan. I closed my eyes briefly. You've got options now, he continued. For once, choose something for yourself. I didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, that was exactly what I was considering. By the time I was called back into the executive floor, the tone had shifted. Less chaos, more control. But underneath it, urgency. Richard Cole was waiting in his office this time. The space matched him, minimalist, sharp, deliberate. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline behind him, the city stretching out like a system of its own, complex, fragile, dependent on unseen structures. Close the door, Daniel, he said. I did. He didn't waste time. I'll be direct, he continued, folding his hands neatly on the desk. We underestimated your role here. That was new. Not denial, not deflection, recognition. We need someone who doesn't just understand the system, but can rebuild it properly, he added. And we believe that person is you. I stayed quiet, because I already knew where this was going. I'm creating a new position, he said. Director of Operational Systems. There it was. You would report directly to me. Full authority over process design, system architecture, and cross-department implementation. My expression didn't change, but internally, everything slowed. And the compensation? I asked. He slid a document across the table. I glanced down, then looked again. Double. More than double. Stock options, performance bonuses, decision-making authority that went far beyond anything I'd had before. This isn't just a promotion, Richard said. It's a structural shift, and we want you leading it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Why now? He didn't hesitate. Because now we understand the cost of not doing it sooner. That answer was honest. I'll need time, I said. Take the weekend, he replied. But we need stability immediately. Can you handle Ellison today? I nodded. I can. When I stepped out of his office, the hallway felt different. People looked at me differently. Not invisible anymore. Visible. Sophie was waiting near my desk. She stood up the moment she saw me. Well? She asked. I set my bag down slowly. They made an offer, I said. Her eyes widened slightly. Like, a real one? Director level. She let out a breath. Wow. But then her expression shifted, more serious. Can I ask you something? Yeah. If you take it, do people like me actually have a future here? The question wasn't about me, not really. It was about everything she had experienced in the past few days. I leaned against the desk slightly. That depends, I said, on whether the system changes. And will it? I met her eyes. If I take the role, it will. She studied me for a moment, then nodded, not fully convinced, but hopeful. That was enough for now. Later that evening, I sat in my apartment, Ryan's business plan open on my laptop. Coffee shop concept, community-driven space, local sourcing, a place built on connection, not efficiency. The opposite of everything I had been living. My phone buzzed. Ryan again. You read it? He asked the moment I picked up. Yeah, I said. It's solid. A pause. You don't sound convinced. I am, I replied. Just thinking. About your job? About everything. He didn't push. That was new. "I'm not saying you have to quit," he said finally. "But maybe there's a version where you don't lose yourself either." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A version where I didn't have to choose one life over the other. For the first time, that felt possible. I didn't sleep much that weekend, not because I was stressed, but because for the first time in years, I had a real choice. Sunday afternoon, I found myself standing outside the location Ryan had sent me, a corner space tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. The glass windows were slightly dusty, the "For Lease" sign still hanging crookedly, but I could see it. The warmth. The life. Not bad, right? I turned. Ryan walked toward me, hands in his jacket pockets, that same restless energy in his stride. Up close, he looked a little more tired than usual, dark circles under his eyes. But there was something else, too. Hope. "It's good," I admitted. He grinned. "Yeah, it is." We stepped inside. The space smelled faintly of old wood and time. He started talking immediately, about layout ideas, community events, late-night acoustic sessions. I listened. Really listened. "You don't have to decide today," he said suddenly, quieter now, "about any of it." I nodded slowly. "I know, but I already had." Monday morning, I walked into Richard's office at 7:30 a.m., back to my old hours, but not my old mindset. "You're early," he noted. "I have my answer," I said. He leaned back slightly. "Let's hear it." "I'll accept the position," I began. "With conditions." His expression sharpened, interested. "I build my own team," I continued, "hand-picked, no reassignment politics." "Reasonable," he said. "I also want full control over training systems and documentation, no partial approvals, no shortcuts." He nodded again. "And," I added, "I'm restructuring workflow ownership across departments. Accountability needs to be visible." Then, done. No negotiation. That told me everything I needed to know. "This only works if the system changes," I said. "It will," he replied. For the first time, I believed it. Later that morning, I found Sophie at her desk. She looked up immediately. "Well?" she asked. I didn't sit. I took the offer. Her shoulders dropped slightly, relief. "Good," she said. "That's really good." "I'm building a team," I added, "and I want you in it." She blinked. "Me?" "You learn fast," I said, "and you ask the right questions." "I'm not," she started. "Ready?" I finished. She nodded. I smiled slightly. "Neither was I," I said. "That didn't stop me." She looked at me for a long moment. Then, "Okay," she said, not confident, but willing. That was enough. That evening, I sat across from Ryan at a small diner, same one we used to go to years ago. "I'm in," I said, sliding the printed document across the table. He frowned slightly. "What's this?" "Investment plan," I replied. "Partial funding. Enough to get you started without killing yourself on loans." He stared at it, then at me. "You serious?" "Yeah." Silence. Then he leaned back, exhaling. "Guess we're both building something now," he said. I nodded. "Yeah," I replied. "We are." And for the first time, it didn't feel like I had to choose between two lives. I was finally creating one that was mine.
6 months later, the office didn't feel like the same place. It wasn't just quieter. It was clearer. Systems that once relied on instinct were now documented, structured, and transparent. Teams didn't hover in confusion anymore. They moved with purpose. Problems still existed, but they surfaced early, visible, owned, not hidden, not silently absorbed. I stood near the glass wall of the operations floor, watching it all unfold. For years, I had been the invisible layer holding everything together. Now, the system held itself. "Still observing?" a voice said behind me. I turned. It was Emily Carter. Early 40s, tall and lean, with sharp features softened only slightly by a calm, measured smile. She had joined 3 months ago as a senior process strategist, someone I personally recruited. Emily had spent over a decade fixing broken corporate structures, and it showed. She spoke less than most, but when she did, People listened. "I like to see if things actually work without me," I replied. She crossed her arms lightly. "And?" I nodded toward the floor. "They do." "That's rare," she said. "Most people build systems that depend on them. You built one that doesn't." I exhaled slowly. That was the point. Across the room, Sophie stood at the center of a small team, explaining something on a screen. Her posture was different now, more grounded, more certain. The hesitation was gone. She had grown into the role faster than even I expected. Not perfect, but capable. More importantly, confident. She caught my eye briefly and gave a small nod before turning back to her team. Not asking for help, leading, exactly where she belonged. That evening, I stood outside a very different kind of building. Warm lights glowed through large windows. Laughter drifted into the street. A small line had formed near the entrance. "Brooks and Brew, Ryan's Cafe." "You're late," he said, stepping out to greet me. He looked different too. Still the same leather jacket, but cleaner, more put together, less restless. Like he had finally found something that held his energy instead of scattering it. "Director schedules," I said with a smirk. "Excuses," he shot back. We walked inside together. The space was exactly how he imagined it. Wooden textures, soft lighting, a place that felt alive without trying too hard. People sat with laptops, others talked quietly over coffee. It wasn't just a business, it was something real. "You did good," I said. He shook his head. "We did." That mattered more than I expected. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Board approved your promotion, VP of Operational Strategy, effective next month." I stared at the screen for a moment. Not surprised, but satisfied. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked around the cafe again. For years I had been chasing recognition. Now I had something better. Balance, purpose, visibility. Not because I demanded it, but because I built something that made it impossible to ignore. Ryan handed me a cup of coffee. "On the house," he said. I took a sip, leaning back slightly, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly where it was supposed to be.
So let me ask you something. If you were in my position, would you keep working in silence, hoping one day someone finally notices your value? Or would you step back, risk everything, and force the world to see what you're truly worth? Would you stay loyal to a company that overlooked you for years? Or walk away and start over where you're finally respected? And when the moment comes, do you choose comfort or growth? Security or self-worth? Because sometimes, the hardest decision isn't about what you can do, it's about what you're finally willing to stop tolerating. So tell me, what would you choose? Drop your answer in the comments, I read every single one. And if this story made you think or reminded you of your own journey, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next story might be the one that changes everything for you.